and welcome to Maiponga Beach and of course the jetty. Yep, dawn. I've travelled down from home to here. It takes about an hour and 40 thereabouts. This jetty can be shot at high tide or low tide. Some beautiful rocks at low tide, but we're here at high tide today. And you can just see me levelling the tripod and just sorting out that composition. I'm using the 32 to 64 here. So there's a very short, small but very steep shingle beach. And as we can see, the waves are quite energetic. So to combat this, I wanted to get to a bit higher for a couple of reasons. Firstly, to avoid those crashing waves, and secondly, to compose the scene with the jetty pylon sitting below the horizon line. I'll change that up later on, but for now, this is the image that I wanted to capture. The settings we have here, f14, and I'm about to run a 2-minute exposure. There's a lot of ambient light, as you can see, so I can easily focus on those pylons. I did consider a longer exposure, but with that full moon, I really didn't want to blow out any highlights. And here's that image now. Okay, I've moved a little closer to the action, as you can see. Well, those waves are splashing over those rocks, and I've just got to be a bit careful with the camera here. But to get the best of the scene, I really wanted to introduce the texture of that shingle shore. That's hard to say, against the water itself. So I've settled on this composition. As I said, those wonderful boulders at the bottom, I've used them to frame the bottom half of the image. And although it looks quite bright here, it's actually still dark. I'm unable to get a fast shutter speed to freeze those waves without cranking up the ISO to a ridiculous amount. So looking at the scene, looking at my histogram, I decided on around 30 seconds, which I thought would be enough to expose for the scene properly. So here's that image now. Now I think it's time to do that tourist shot. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I'm going to shoot down the guts of the thing, so straight down this group of pylons that we've got here. And now I think, always remember about safety at the water's edge. You know, wet stones are slippy, stones with green algae on them are especially so, but black algae, any stones with black algae, avoid because they are deadly. So just please remember, always, be careful with your footing whenever you're around the seashore. And this may seem the easiest shot in the world, but you really do have to pay attention to the details. You see, the simpler the shot, the more accurate you have to be. So I've leveled the camera and now I'm centering it, making sure it's placed in line with that central post. And once you've got that absolutely right and nicely balanced, then you're free to focus and begin to think about the exposure settings. So for this particular image, I've decided on combining 2 shots. A 2-minute exposure focused on the jetty to capture some movement in the clouds and flatten the water to a lovely milky blue. And also a 30-second image which is focused on the shoreline rocks and that's to capture some of that white textured water, and I intend to blend them both together later on in post. So as you're aware, I use Nissi filters quite often. For the long exposure here, I use the 6-stop ND Grad, and for the shorter exposure for those front rocks, I use the 3-stop ND Grad. And just to help out, I also used a 1.2 soft grad, which I pulled down just to cover the sky. You may have noticed in the last image that there was some colour starting to develop in the sky. You can see on the right hand side that there was no clouds at all, but off to the left there was a few, not a lot, not very high, but enough to create some interest above that jetty. So I've shot back to the right hand side, as you can see here, and I've actually got the camera a little lower than I had earlier on, and that's partly to minimise some of that middle ground between the rocks and the jetty, and also to get a little closer to the action. So again, I had a couple of images in mind. The first one was a longer exposure, of course, you know me, but the second one is that wave action was just a little bit too nice to that's me explaining it there, too nice to ignore. So I'm taking a whole pile of shorter images here, and then I'll throw on the 6-stop and do some longer exposures too. So with this one, it's spray and pray, hit as each wave comes in. I'm hitting the shutter. I've got no ND Grad on here, just a soft grad to tame that sky, and I'm anywhere between a quarter and half a second, and I think some of the images were around a second as well, just playing around with those textures just to see what we can capture. And I'll put the shorter exposure up first, so I'll throw that up now. Okay, probably the last composition of the day, and yeah, we're going for a slightly higher composition here. First thing we need to do is always check your polarizer. As you can see, there's some horrible vignetting up there in the sky, so the polarizer needs to get rid of that. Even though the challenge is that it'll still allow glare on those rocks. So I'm looking at a 2-minute exposure here, hoping to capture, you know, the last of that delicate light. And I have to work fast before the sun comes up behind me and washes everything out. So I'm just about ready to go. And yeah, one final check of all my settings, and if it all works out, I'll pop it up now. Okay, this is me telling you how much of a great time I've had. I do hope my narration hasn't bored you too much. All it leaves me to say is please take care of yourself and your loved ones. And until next time, you know what? See ya. Take care. Bye.